Do the big techs still need to keep pushing forward and being the leaders here for the overall market to rally into year end? Or do we see another sector perhaps taking over as the leader sometime soon?
I think it's possible we see a rotation, maybe a second wind from some sectors that haven't performed as well. Financials is one that stands out in my mind. It's a classic rate cut beneficiary, and it's one that started a stealth amount of outperformance here in the second half of the year in the U.S. and abroad. In fact, it's the best performing sector outside the U.S. in the second half of the year. So if that were to continue, these valuations are very low. So there's room for that to move on improving earnings, steeper yield curves as central banks cut rates, and just an outlook for maybe a rise in valuation as well. All that suggests there's more fuel for stock market gains, not just coming from the small handful of stocks that have really driven it so far this year.
And it's really interesting that you mentioned financials, because actually when you look at the year-to-date chart, yes, okay, the Mag 7s have outperformed year-to-date, but in the second half alone, the smaller cap stocks and financials have outperformed the Mag 7. Are smaller cap stocks also an area you would be looking at, Jeff?
It's an area that's interesting, but I have some concerns about it. One, there's a number of companies that are simply not profitable in that group. So it's not a high quality group of companies. I think there will be a focus on quality next year. I'm also a little bit worried about, again, what happened back in the first year of Trump's first term, 2017, where small cap stocks rallied into that year only to disappoint and underperform in a year where we actually saw global growth pick up and the market rotate to more economically sensitive areas outside the U.S., like emerging markets and developed market stocks. So I think U.S. small caps getting their rally here, and that might continue through Inauguration Day, but could take a step back early next year.
Jeff, if Trump's win is all about delivering for Main Street, then where is the U.S. consumer in all of this? And especially given this narrative that tariffs could backfire, tariffs could be a tax on the consumer, how then are you approaching... Oh, and by the way, we've already got these affordability issues and trading down, which is a big component of the margin pressure that we've been seeing in some of the retailers. How then are you approaching the sector?
Yeah, it's a good point. Target talked about how there's really been a shift down in the consumer to lower priced items, and that's affecting the mix of many retailers out there. And that is a challenge. We've got consumers that are spent out. They've been spending out of their savings, and now income growth is slowing a little bit as well, and now with the threat of a rebound from inflation. So certainly there's a lot dependent on that. I'd expect U.S. economic growth to slow next year, even as many of the rest of the world's economies improve their pace of economic growth. Tariffs are certainly a risk, but it's interesting to see how much. I take Trump seriously on tariffs, but maybe not literally. I think if you were to add up all the tariffs he's proposed, you get a weighted average tariff rate of something like 26% for the U.S., up from 2.6 now. That's akin to what we saw going into the Great Depression. I don't think that's likely. That would certainly entail a lot of inflation pressure on the consumer. I think something more realistic, maybe seeing tariff rates double or even move up to 10%. The IMF has estimated that will be a fairly modest impact on U.S. economic growth, just shaving 0.4% off of GDP next year. Of course, there's the potential for much more than that, or even less, depending on how they're actually implemented. So we could certainly see a wild ride with U.S. economic forecast and what it means for the consumer next year. I'm a little bit more confident in the brighter outlook I'm seeing in Europe, believe it or not, for better economic growth next year.